Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Monday night, and I'm so excited to be back in sunny South Florida. As you guys know, this weekend I was in Minnesota, 19 degrees, but I'm here defrosted and happy to see you, and I have an amazing two guests for you. You get a twofer. I need to charge for that. I've got an amazing two guests for you. But for those of you who are new to this show, who are just tuning in, can I give you a heartfelt thank you for joining us? I am Ann Charlius, and you have reached Zero to Shero. And the purpose of this show is to really help empower women, and particularly women entrepreneurs, to live their best life, to know that, yes, you are a Shero, not a hero, a Shero. And so tonight's topic is something that might be a little passé, be a little bit controversial, but I think it's an important topic, especially given what's going on in media today. Now, we're going to be talking about sex, and as you see in the title of this show, the topic is sex killing your success? Is sex killing your success? Now, before we get started, let's do some laundry. I want you to hit that share button and share this out, because maybe someone needs some great advice from our resident experts, okay? Hit that share button. Hello, Periscope. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook Live. And, of course, hello to everyone listening to us on iHeartRadio and regular traditional radio. So can you please introduce yourself, each of you, to our audience?
Sure. My name's Larry Siegel. I'm a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And I'm his kid brother. I'm Richard Siegel. I'm a sex therapist and sexuality educator, and I train psychotherapists and medical professionals in sex therapy and sexual medicine.
Okay, wonderful. And you guys also have a show on this network, correct?
We do.
Can you tell the audience about your show?
It's called Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, and we just get together every Monday right before your wonderful show and talk about sex.
Okay, wonderful. So you need to definitely check them out. It's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time each and every Monday, just before moi, just before me. You can check them out. They'll get you ready so that you can get your sex drive together, and I'll get you ready when it comes to your business.
We're your foreplay.
Yeah, foreplay. Ooh, yes, I like it. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this topic is the whole Me Too movement, as a survivor of rape, has really touched me in a meaningful way. But as this movement is growing, it's becoming this mixed bag of sorts.
Getting pretty amorphous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So can you share with the audience a little bit about your take on the Me movement and where you see the movement is at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I look at what's going on, I have to say, in all honesty, there's some ambivalence. On the one hand, I am so glad and so pleased that women are starting to feel comfortable and safer coming out and talking about these experiences. I am so pleased that we're finally having this dialogue, that we're finally talking about this instead of continuing to sweep it under the rug that we have for so many decades. But the ambivalent part is, and there's really no way to say this in a sugar-coated or any other way than direct, but there's become a witch hunt element, I think, that's underneath it. And the reason that is a problem for me is because it's going to start to muddy the waters.
Right.
So that the people we really do need to help and the things that we really do need to focus on, we may not be able to. I feel the same way in terms of the Me Too with all the men.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I think that's another ambivalent point for me that muddies the waters. That of course, we have to recognize that sexual abuse and sexual assault is an issue for men as well as for women. But this movement, I really feel like this is a women's movement. This is women's time, and men need to. You know what? It's kind of like when the Black Lives Matter movement started. and people started going, well, all lives matter. And that's kind of like just slapping down the point, right? And saying that, no, you don't.
And it's a way of avoiding the discussion.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a way of avoiding the discussion, and I didn't think of it that way.
I think this is a women's moment.
And it's interesting. I have a private group on Facebook for sexual assault survivors. And I just do it out of passion. It's not for business purposes, because I do believe you need to still have passion in your life. We'll get into that later.
Yep.
But
Interesting concept.
a few of the women said they're not on board with the Me Too movement because they feel like the Me Too movement may force survivors to reveal their story before they're ready. So it's kind of taking away the last piece of power they feel they have, because they're being forced to be able to communicate this.
Right. Well, look at what's going on in Alabama with Roy Moore. These women were outed. They did not come forward. This was in somebody, journalists doing the story and looking into it. These women were outed.
Well, it was
and
voluntary.
A lot of these, well, I mean, they agreed to talk to them, but they did not, come out and make this happen on their own.
Yeah.
And that's by the way, something that people really have to consider in terms of how they evaluate the legitimacy of all these women coming out. None of these women are asking for anything. They except to be heard.
To be heard.
And that's it. So, this is not some, political subversion that's going on. These are real women with real stories and these real issues. And, and I agree, that sense of bringing people out in a place that is not of their own choosing.
It's just so heartbreaking. Well, it's disgusting and heartbreaking at the same time that because so many women live with pain and, the aftermath of sexual assault for decades and aren't empowered to even talk about it to anybody. Something like this happens and more women are coming out and they're accused of lying or making it up or saying, what took you so long? How could it be 40 years later and now you're upset about it? This is disgusting.
It is very disgusting. And there's a lot of power in sharing your story. I had to learn that the hard way myself.
But on your terms.
On my term. Well, I was forced, actually.
Really?
I was forced because I shared with you guys a couple weeks ago, but briefly because you're about to go in. But I had to deal with being able to share my story because as a law student, I had to potentially go before a board who would ask me very intense questions. And if I was not able to answer their questions without having strong emotion, there is a likelihood that they would deem that I have not healed, and then therefore I would not be appropriate as an attorney because I may have cases with that. So my professors told me, because I was talking to them about it, saying that, okay, I'm going to have to go through this process. And they said, listen, because I was tearing up. I wasn't crying. I was just tearing up. And they said, absolutely not. You cannot cry before that board. You cannot tear up.
You cannot be vulnerable.
So you have to go to therapy. And one of the things my talk therapist taught me, and we actually did this at the beginning of every session, I had to restate the story.
Yeah.
And eventually, I didn't believe it at first, but eventually I came to the point where now I can share it without having this visceral reaction.
Let me ask you, your take on this. Is it just a semantic thing, or do you think there's a difference between this kind of experience actually being empowering or women having to find their power in it? Right? You see a distinction at all there?
Yes, I think you have to find your power in it. I think for me, that's what really is impactful. Sharing your story, and then after that, the next day, you're back to normal. And it was just a one moment in time. It was just one social media post. Being able to dig deep on the subject, being able to work with other survivors, being able to retell your story over and over. I think that vibration over and over is where the power lies. But guess what? That's still a first step. If it's only one social media post and that's all you can do, because see, some situations are complicated. A person in my group, her sexual assault criminal, as it were, is the father of her children.
Yeah.
So she can't bring him down because that's still the kid's
And
dad.
unfortunately, that's not unusual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So listen, she can't do the Me Too movement and talk about her story too much because she have children that'll put two and two together, and that could be devastating for a family.
Sure.
Now, let's talk, because you guys know my clients call me the queen of cash flow. And I was just enamored by the fact that the classic book in wealth and business actually talks about sex. You guys have all heard of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich?
I'm afraid I haven't.
Okay, well, this is a classic book
seen that
about
book.
building wealth. He studied very wealthy people, and it basically was a culmination of his study of what it takes to be wealthy. And in the book, it says, sex desire is the most powerful of human desire. So strong and compelling is the desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge in it.
There's your title right there. Sex and your success.
Because we're seeing these guys are coming down. Recently, we had Charlie Rose today, who's been suspended. His shows have been pulled. So what is your take on that? What is your response to Napoleon Hill's quote and what's going on today?
That's a really profound quote, and I do see it a lot in the kind of things that people come to sex therapy for, or the kind of crises that couples deal with, especially affairs, right? If you were to ask someone, again, in this sort of intellectual, reasoned, cognitive way, would you right now be willing to throw away your entire career, throw away your house, risk divorce, lose custody of your kids for 10 minutes of a thrill? Nobody in their right mind would say yes to that question.
Right.
But in the moment, in the emotion, when there's no reason and there's no intellect, people readily risk everything.
Right.
Guys end up eating SpaghettiOs on a hot plate in a Motel 6.
But but there's also a subtext, right? There's also a subtext there. And, as much as we talk about power and entitlement, like we started talking about a while ago, and with a colleague of ours, Galen, and what he's just pulled out, I think all of this speaks to the fact that men have not been empowered sexually. Most men's sense of masculinity is more insecure than empowered. And I think a lot of this kind of behavior is sort of symptomatic of that. It's an expression of that. It's compensation.
But we call
It's like the bully.
peacocking, right?
It's like the bully.
Yeah. Exactly.
The bully probably has the lowest self-esteem at the school.
Compared to a martial artist. I often make that comment. You'll never know just how good a martial artist is because they don't need to prove it, because there is empowerment in their knowing themselves. There's power and strength in that. The bully has to prove it because they don't believe it.
A light bulb moment. We just had a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about sexual harassment. And, it's a real thing. Companies come down. CEOs come down. And when I was in corporate America, because I was in major corporations, billion-dollar corporations that did sexual assault trainings, and not that they work, but people were aware, and there was an expectation. And oftentimes when I wanted to connect with a superior and do what the good old boys do, like, let's go have lunch together, or, let's do this together, I often saw them look at me, right? And they didn't know what to say, what to respond, and I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking in their mind, well, Ann seems nice. Should I have lunch with her alone, or maybe I should go with a colleague? And as a woman, it was always very upsetting to me because I couldn't get that connection that my male colleague could get with that superior, because they could go and have drinks and it'd be no problem. No one's going to look any sort of way. And so what is your advice for people, women who are in the professional world, who they understand sexual harassment is real, but they want to make meaningful connections with their male superiors? Because let's be real, those who have those connections are the ones that get promoted, right? How do you balance it all?
It's kind of tough especially in the current climate, because the pendulum has started to swing so far the other way.
Right.
So there's a lot of that paranoia. There's a lot of that, I don't know what to do. The boundaries are not clear. There's a lot of this sort of fuzzy footsteps that people are taking. But I think it's a simple idea. It comes down to, I think, what women and people in general kind of need to have for their basic success. And that is the sense of themselves, knowing what they want and not being afraid to stand up for it. And if something is said that is misconstrued, correct it. Redirect it.
Redirect it.
It does. I think a lot of this fear and this paranoia, and I think even the whole idea of sexual harassment has gone a little too far the other way. That if I say something, or either a compliment, if I call you sweetie, that people will have a meltdown over that. That's not sexual harassment, right? And I think there's such an oversensitivity that it's got to be a really tough place for women to be in. Right. Not just men, but a really tough place for women to be in, to know how they should navigate themselves.
I remember the bell ringer from the first time you did our show was, remember you said confidence is the new sexy.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yeah.
But I also can't help but think that there's a sexist element to that as well. I don't mean it that didn't sound right. But just for women and for men. That confidence is the new sexy for women doesn't mean the same thing as it does for men. For men, unfortunately, it translates to this power-tripping thing. Like
aggressive.
That confidence means that narcissism, that I'm entitled, that I can treat
But I don't see
woman.
that as confidence.
Well,
I see that as cocky and arrogant and entitled.
Yeah, right.
Like, to me, confidence is that sort of empowered strength that I don't have to prove
respect.
that.
Yeah. Right.
But I think you make a great point that words have power, and we all put meaning to words very differently. So you're absolutely right. And, confidence, I feel, is sexy. However, it's interesting you brought up the compliments, because I actually worked for a major corporation who we settled a lawsuit because a female supervisor told a male subordinate that he looked nice in those jeans. Wow. And he got over $30,000 for that compliment.
Wow, really?
Settled.
That's a hostile workplace?
You look nice in those jeans. Are you going to sue me now?
Oh, wow.
Now, first of all, for a man to claim victimization in that way, that's a co-opting.
We muted the conversation because we were having the conversation with the attorney. We were all we had to mute it because we were shocked. We were shocked that because we denied his unemployment because he was fired because his performance as a sales professional was subpar. And we denied his unemployment. And so the way he got back...
Oh, so this was a ploy.
This was a ploy. I believe it was a ploy.
Okay.
But she did make the compliment. And so because in her mind, she copped to it because she thought... What's the issue here?
Right.
However, it was an issue for the legal team, and they settled.
Okay, in the most technical sense, yes, I can see that. But I think when you compare a man's experience in something like that compared to the constant, long-standing things that women have always had to suffer through, that have always been judged and identified by body parts.
Absolutely.
I think it's a bit of a stretch for this guy to claim victimization.
Absolutely. And you said, sweetie, I have a law professor who is very tiny. She's about 5 feet tall, very thin. And she said when she first started practicing law 20 years ago, judges often, even though she was an attorney in their court, from the bench, in open court, would call her sweetie.
Yeah. And that's a very different sort of template to be operating from than anything. And I think and again, not to say that guys don't get sexually harassed and guys don't experience sexual abuse, but it's not on the same plane.
Right.
And we have to, I think, keep it separate, because then we lose some. Just like I think these false sexual harassment claims, that the oversensitivity, all the time we have to spend dealing with that is time that we are not able to spend dealing with real and legitimate, serious cases.
Now, I want to talk about entrepreneurship and sex, because there are two debates going out there. I did some research before the show because you guys are smart, so I want to be prepared, okay? But one group says that entrepreneurship is great for sex. It increases your sex drive because you have that creativity, that competition mode, and you have the drive to go to bed like that. But then there's another group that says no, entrepreneurship is the worst for your sex life because you're tired.
Too busy building an empire.
You're building an empire, and you're taking all of that drive and passion and giving it to your business instead of to your partner. What is your take on that?
I would say the answer is in one word.
Yeah.
Balance.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's about balance.
So I was going to say practically it's probably the latter. That people would say it's bad, logistically, time management. In spirit, I would like to believe that confidence thing, that if somebody feels great about themselves and they feel accomplished and they're really driven, but in reality, I think most entrepreneurs are exhausted most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, because they're
Finding
not
that
balancing.
balance.
Right.
I don't know how many times I ask people in my practice, what are you working this hard for?
Right.
Right? Don't lose sight of
Did
why
you guys hear that?
you're working 90 hours a week for what? So you don't have time to enjoy each other and your family and your vacation and
so that you can be alone in that big home.
Now there are some people where again that is sort of their course. I talk about this a lot actually. Not all psychopaths are serial killers. There are a lot of people that have achieved that high level of success, that mega success in their own entrepreneurship. And I'll use someone like Steve Jobs as an example, who kind of psychopathic.
Absolutely.
And that is what drove him. And that is what really helped him achieve that level of success. You can't really have compassion. You can't really have much empathy. You certainly will not let failure stop you. But that it kind of sort of your life is inherently out of balance.
Right.
That's all you're driven to do.
Those who are very, very successful, they tend to be very psychopath about that. You're absolutely right. Now, what about expectations? I had someone, because I'm gonna do some self-disclosure. They're doctors, I'm not, so I can do self-disclosure. When I was in my 20s, and you would see a big guy who's tall and strong looking, and then in the bedroom he has a small wiener. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's like so disappointing. Like, how can he be so amazing and then such a disappointment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Expectations.
The expectations. Now, you guys are sex therapists. I'm sure women, if you're dating or whoever you're dating, they probably have great expectations for you guys.
Oh, absolutely. And I would try to.
But do you guys fail? Do you guys pass the test, or do you guys fail the test?
No, sometimes it's not it's not so great. It's not so attractive because it can be intimidating.
Right.
Really?
Right. More often, I think there's that. There's like, you're a sex therapist.
Really?
Yeah. There's something. It's more intimidating than enticing.
So it's almost as if. I hear supermodels say the same thing. Supermodels, when they're interviewed, and a lot of times they're single, they often
guys
say...
are afraid to approach them.
Yes, I'm a Victoria's Secret model, but I'm single.
Right.
No one approaches me.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying that's been your experience also as therapist.
It's kind of an occupational hazard. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, because people often feel, and the one thing that I've heard a lot too is, I'm afraid that you would be evaluating me all the time. Right? I try to tell, unless you're paying me and I'm on the clock, no, I'm not evaluating you. That's not what I'm here for.
He's a man after, he's catching his coins. Exactly. You're not on the clock, honey. You're not on I like that. But it's so true. And even plastic surgeons. I laugh with my OBGYN all the time because I say, Dr. Weiss, I love you. I love Dr. Weiss. He's the best OBGYN out there. Absolutely wonderful. But I used to tell him all the time, like, when you go to parties, guys must think you're like a goddess, a god, that is. And he said to me, listen, I quickly tell them, no, my job probably makes you not want to have sex.
Right.
I remind them that, remember, women come to me when they have problems down there.
That's right.
Not when everything's nice and wonderful.
Absolutely.
So, there's definitely occupational hazards.
Yeah. And parties and things like that, I don't tell people right off the bat, a sex therapist, because just like with OBGYNs, you know how many times I've had people want to show me their rash? You know? Or is this normal? It's like, see a doctor, you know? You know, again, time and place.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I just want these meatballs right here. Keep your rash to yourself, please.
That's right.
So yeah, occupational hazard, that's a real thing.
The divorce rate among couples therapists is ridiculous and always has been.
Yeah.
It's very common to see therapists.
Child psychologists often have very unruly kids. Yeah. You know, they're not that proverbial shoemaker's kid analogy.
Right, no, the cobbler with holes in his own shoes.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's so true, though.
And I hate to admit.
Even as a business coach, because I'm working on so many other people's business.
Right.
And one of the things that I did, and that's where scheduling is powerful. I broke it several times this year, but one of the things is Mondays and Fridays, I don't book appointments with the clients.
Good.
That is my time to organize my business, my concerns, my issues, so that I can be good for them on those other days of the week. Because if I don't do that, and I had a conversation with a client this weekend who said, well, Ann, do I have to really wait all the way to Monday? Can you just give me the answer now? Yes, you have. Even though it was a simple yes or no answer. So I could have given it to her, but I had to set the boundaries so that she knows, because then every week it's just going to be a yes or no answer.
Right.
And I think we need to do that in all of our professions, all of our careers.
And, you know, going back to what you were saying before, why are we working? I think, and again, what you were saying, and in terms of what you can even model, in terms of what you just described, there has to be, you know, all the things that people do, there has to be time for me. You know, even if there's a day in your calendar, you write me. And you treat that as important as any other appointment that you have, because that's the first thing that people will let go of. If they do put that time in for themselves or their relationship, and then somebody may call, they want to have a meeting or they want to do this there, it's okay, well, I will use this time. But if you had another business appointment in that slot, you wouldn't do that. So treat it at least that important.
Absolutely. So we are 30 minutes went by so quickly, so immediately. I love you guys. I just want to take you guys and put me in my pockets, put you in my pockets, have you in the bedroom with me giving instructions. I need to next level it this year. I need some advice, guys. So please tell the audience how they can find you, what you're up to, what you're doing. It's holiday time, what you guys have planned for the closing of this year.
Wow. Well, you could tune in. You could find us on Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, with the Siegel brothers. We got to change the name of the show already.
Yeah.
I can be reached at ricky@modernsextherapy.com.
Right. And I am with the Sage Institute. My number is 561-254-4237. And you can reach me at larry@sageinstitute.org.
Reach them. Power up your sex life. Not just your business. Power up your sex life. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Good night.